Alright gang, it's Hensel time again. That's right, we've got two more that have shown up. And they both need, well, quite a lot of repair, to be honest. But this will give us an opportunity to compare and contrast them a little bit, see where they differ and see where they're the same, and we'll gain a little bit more insight into this enigmatic luthier who worked in Toronto during the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I guess we can start off by talking a little bit about the headstocks here. You know, the first time I saw one of these, I said to myself, that's an awful lot of work to do on a guitar that's a catalog guitar, retails for how much? Not very much. Other than the fact that he had a lot of pride in his name, it doesn't seem like an effective use of your time. Not very profitable. Then I saw the next one and I said, well, maybe he had some kind of pantograph carver that will let him do this from a template that would speed up production. That would make more sense. Now I've seen these two, and looking back at the photos from those other ones, no, these are all individually done every single time, that's kind of amazing. Just looking at the workmanship, not so hard to lay out. You could use a marking gauge. All of these lines here, the straight lines are all, they run parallel to surfaces or edges of the structure of the headstock. So you could use the marking gauge and just come along and scribe those out. Deepen the lines with scratch awl or a point of some kind, and then maybe use a little tiny chisel. Or looking at this, the surface is pebbly enough that I wonder whether he had some kind of little punch that he would come along. I guess they call that repoussé in metalwork, where you define the background by sort of stippling or punching it. But we're back to the same question, like how many of these did you have to do to be profitable in the 1930s? Assuming that you're going to make, you know, how many, like $3-4 a guitar? That's a half hour's worth of work there, when you could just as easily have silkscreened something on, or maybe even a little pearl, you know, script or something. So, it doesn't make sense to me. I think it's probable that Hensel used a mold to make these guitars, probably an outside mold. They share asymmetries between all of the ones I've seen. The outline is always a bit, there's some bulbous areas on it, especially here on the treble side, upper bout. See how the side comes into the neck? It doesn't meet sort of perpendicular to the center line. It pitches in at an obtuse angle, so it gives you this interesting shoulder here that comes in, curves this way. They all seem to do that, so either maybe the two sides of the mold didn't line up perfectly, or there was something in his building process that made this happen over and over again. This one shows it the same way. The bridges are all very similar. They've got this characteristic little landing or rabbet on the ends of them, probably cut on a shaper. Okay, one of these guitars seems to be in better shape than the others. This one has, well, a nice decent piece of spruce for the top. It's got mahogany for the back and sides, solid. Nice piece of mahogany. The finish on these, we never used pore filler. They always seem to be open, so you see the little grain speckles. This one has, I think, shellac on it. I think it's been repolished at some point. The bridge is mostly intact. It's been cut down at least once to lower the action. It's got a rosewood saddle. You can still see the ghost of the pickguard here. This is interesting. The original holes for the pickguard were plugged at some point, but there's 3 new holes, so a second pickguard was applied. Those kind of line up with 2 holes on the lower side of the binding here, which kind of remind me of the ones you would see on an early Gibson archtop with a low neck angle, say like the L2s or L3s had that kind of pickguard that attached there and sometimes screwed to the top or to the bridge. But what's really bizarre is those 2 holes recur on the other side. So did someone not figure, I mean, how does that happen? How do you make that mistake, guy? It could have happened when this guitar had a neck reset. You can see that there's a crack here on both sides of the 12th fret. It's actually, it tells me that the tongue of this guitar was probably removed at some point in the past so they could gain access to the dovetail. The old way of doing the neck reset, before we started steaming the necks off. Very few people do this anymore because it's kind of invasive and structurally it can cause serious problems. The tongue of the guitar is actually free from the top along most of its entire length, I think. You can actually see light all the way through to the other side. Big old screw hole, so that tells me there's probably a screw holding this neck on. It's been plugged. These tuners, probably 1960s Japanese tuners with plastic buttons. Not great tuners, and we're going to replace those. These are actually installed backwards, so you have to turn the strings the opposite way you think you should to make them tune. There's a rosewood nut here. It could be original. I saw one of the R.S. Williams guitars had a rosewood nut that looked very much like this. Nice ebony board. Frets there's reasonable height left in them. So we're going to do some stuff with that bridge. We're going to see if we can change the action a bit. Of course, we're going to shift this over to a left-handed configuration. I think I might just pull this bridge right off and make a new one so we can save this one in case anyone ever wants to change it back. There was a seam separation on the back at one point, down in the lower bout, but to shore it up, someone went along and made a back graft that covered right over the label there. That's pretty interesting. It wasn't necessary at this point, but I guess he just wanted to be better safe than sorry. The bridge is a funky piece of Brazilian rosewood. It's hard to show it in the right lighting here. The grain on it runs off at an angle. It's not straight grained, and at some point, I don't know, before or after the guitar was assembled, the corner here fell off, broke off. You can see finish has actually been applied right up to the edge there, and the bridge has a coating of shellac on it too. So I think this is probably French polished all at the same time. But other than that, it's in good shape. Sounds good. Now this is a very different guitar in a lot of respects. First off, the top. This is quite a different piece of wood than any of the other artist models I've seen. It's quite wide in the grain, and it doesn't look like spruce to me. I'm almost willing to bet that this is Douglas fir, which is bizarre. Still has the pick guard. And this is very interesting. This is the only guitar I've seen that has the bridge that has not been cut down from its full height. So we can see it's actually a very high bridge for the time period. And you can see this interesting pointed detail. The wings come around here. So he had a shaper that cut the back edge and the top all in one go. It's more like a piece of furniture molding. And it's fairly triangular in shape, in profile. So I don't know what's going on with the back and sides on this guitar. It's very strange. The owner thinks it's mahogany. I'm not so sure. It's very, very light in color. And it reminds me of like the Philippine mahogany Luan that you could buy in home centers in the 80s and 90s as a substitute for real mahogany. They call it mahogany, but it wasn't. It's kind of straw colored. And the grain, although it's reminiscent, isn't quite the same. See, there's evidence of a seam separation on the back. Got some initials again. This time is JHC. Jesus H. Christ. The neck too. Yeah, that does not look like mahogany at all. It almost like the grain looks like elm. Slightly like ash. The profile is slightly chunkier than the other guitars. The heel there, you can see there's a great big bolt that goes through it, and it's been covered with, looks like Bondo, which is great. The sides have split on both sides into the upper bout. Probably a violent removal of the neck at some point. I think this area here that comes to a point on the neck shaft moves farther forward than the other guitars I've seen. This is about even with the first fret. It's not really uncomfortable, it's slightly less elegant. And like, what's going on? I mean, the fill is a darker color than the body of the guitar. Like, it's red. It looks like it should be mahogany. There's this interesting mottled effect on the bottom here. and it's obviously been refinished at some point, but I'm wondering, maybe, like, was this in a pawn shop window for several decades and bleached to this color? Bizarre. So the fingerboard is not ebony this time, it's rosewood of some description. I think it's Indian rosewood. And again, it's got a finish on top of it, which it can't be original. And a strange stripy effect, like someone wiped something on one side of the fret, on all of them, and it acted like a UV inhibitor and preserved some of the darker color of the rosewood. And again, that headstock is quite a bit lighter than any of the others I've seen. The neck is actually, I can't show you, but there's a big metal plate on the front end of the block and a big bolt, or a nut for that bolt to go into. Inside is very dirty. That center brace there looks like an original spruce brace to me, but you can see a patch there, and there's another brace, the upper transverse brace. Let's see if we can zoom in and get it. This is the upper transverse brace, and I'm pretty sure that's not original. See that finger joint there? That looks like it came off of a piece of 1x3 at the from the Home Depot. So I think someone has probably replaced at least one and possibly two of the original braces, maybe to get the back into a better arch. Maybe the back came off, who knows? So this guitar is very different from any of the other ones I've seen with the artist's name on it. It's a lot heavier than the others as well. It's got some structural issues, even with, I haven't checked it out without the riser on it, but I can tell just by, fretting at the first fret that the action is going to be terrible. It's had the one neck reset, it's going to need another. See what we can do about that, because it's, talk about a serious can of worms with a Bondo in it. Yeah, it just seems slightly coarser. Okay, time for the experiment. We're going to see where the bridge is located on this one. You'll recall the last time it was misplaced by quite a substantial amount. So we've got 312 millimeters to the center of the 12th fret. So we're looking for 624 plus about 2 millimeters for compensation. And we have come up with 631. So we've got the same issue again. And that, okay, so this bridge has never been removed, I don't think, so we can check and see about my hypothesis regarding maybe he mistook the bridge front edge line for the saddle line. So yeah, 626 to the front edge of the bridge. So that's exactly what he did, which is disappointing. You wonder how. So we think he's probably a violin guy. Comes over to Canada, realizes he's not going to make a lot of money making violins here. So he gets his hands on an American guitar, takes it apart, figures out what's going on there, and decides to duplicate it. He takes the measurement there from the nut to the front edge of the bridge and transposes it, makes up a story stick, and ever after they all end up that way. Is that what happened? Oh, just notice this. Someone has removed the 18th fret there. It's plugged in, but it's gone. Interesting. Now, this guitar we get 626.5. Whoa! All right, Arthur. Oh, good job, buddy. So I guess maybe he got rid of his story stick after a while and realized they weren't playing in tune. A lot of things about this one make me suspect it's probably a later date than the other ones. Just going back to the inside of this guitar, look how dark that wood is. That looks like mahogany to me. And there's some mineral streaks down farther where you can't see that match up with ones on the outside, so we know that it's solid. So yeah, it must have faded quite a bit. Anyway, these guitars, a lot of work. It'll probably take place over the next month, and I will come up with a video for each of them as they go along. So, more Hensels.